It's the second part of the very first session of this conference day. We will have three presentations followed by a short Q&A before we then are able to listen to some concluding remarks from Professor Ed Constable. So for the last time, I would kindly remind the speakers about the 10-minute time limit for the presentation. I will try to give you a hint via chat or raise my hand 1 minute before your time is over. And so don't lose time. And we will start with Maria del Mar Alonso Almeida from the Autonomous University of Madrid. And the presentation is titled Shared Mobility in Cities After COVID-19, Changes in Offer and Demand in Europe. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I want to present my research in shared mobility in cities because we think that certain economy has been to transform the economy in Europe, worldwide, but we are focused in Europe. And then there is a lot of new business models and new ways to see the accumulation of goods, because there is a difference between the old situation before the last downturn and now. And for example, we think that certain economy has changed the way of see the accumulation of goods. Then the people want to live experience and not to accumulate goods. And then one of the sectors most affected for this new way of living is the transportation. And then certain mobility, for example, in megacities like Madrid, for example, has transformed the way of see the urban transport in the megacities. In this way, the living in megacities is very hard because there is a lot of congestion, a lot of environmental problems, a lot of health problems. Then, in addition, European Union demand from the megacities and from the countries to reduce the environmental emissions, and it's really important to change the way of the people is moving. For that reason, sharing mobilities enable to individuals to improve their mobility, but even below the limits of the public transportation, because sharing mobility allows to use one transport that is not your shared transport, but in the like if that kind of mobility was used. And then at this moment, well, before the pandemic, the most popular way of shared mobility in Madrid and in the main cities in Europe was car sharing, because car sharing allow to transport in more wide area than, for example, bicycle, with less effort. And then, for example, in Madrid, we see that we have a lot of possibilities to share mobility, for example, car sharing, for example, motor sharing, or other type of shared mobility. But the most popular is car sharing, because the possibilities to move in Madrid were beyond the central city. You can use this kind of mobility for a lot of places inside the big area of Madrid, as you can see in this part of the presentation. Then we have different types of car sharing, free floating and road trip. And really, we have a very hub of cars because we have more than 1,000, 7,000 units of car sharing. We have more than 4,000 units of motor sharing and more than 8,000 electric scooters. In addition, we have included in one platform the Madrid Mass initiative that it includes all kinds of public transportation, including Cabify or other kind of public transportation, for example, like taxi, in addition to train, underground, bus, and all kind of mobility. Then, in order to analyze what happened before the pandemic and after the pandemic, we have used three different sources of data. Research notice, because we can use the ethnographic mode of research. Indeed, interviews with administration and companies, and focus group with participants or users. For example, in the case of research observation before the pandemic, we can say that every day the demand of car sharing and other type of sharing mobility is increasing because the people prefer to have the choices in her house that and then they can use depending on the moment of the day to work one kind of mobility and to walking, for example, or to leisure another kind of mobility. And then this gives the opportunity to use different kinds of mobility, including the platforms that, for example, the people in change their car. For example, like iMobiles, Jetagram, or social car. During the pandemic, the reality is that the cars disappear off the street. No more sharing mobility in the street because no people in the street, and then the companies and the administration think that it's not very good idea to have the shared transportation in the street in order to preserve the safety of the transportation. With the people, the local government think that this kind of mobility is really good for the people because not only for the people for some reasons and for the city for another reason. For example, in the case of the city, is really good because the people use rational, make one more rational use of the transportation. The people use more the public transportation to go to the central city, the reduce of the total number of cars, the reduce the environment to the emission for the environment, and more people goes to the city center, and they have more places to walk. And not for the cars, because you can use for example, the parkings, you can transfer the parkings in gardens, for example. In addition, they think that the car sharing contributes to control pollution in different ways, because in Madrid there is a very big problem with the pollution. It promotes the use of electric cars with zero emissions, reduce the number of vehicles, and there is a lot of benefits for inhabitants, less pollution, the problem of air, more open space for walking, etc. And then the demand of this kind of, after pandemic, the demand of this kind of service is really high, because the people prefer this kind of transportation than public transportation. The people has a lot of fear. I know that it's less the time, but I would like, for example, to share the things that the people say after the pandemic. The pandemic, the people think that they have a lot of fare to transport in public transportation because there is a lot of people, and in addition, in very big city like Madrid, the public transportation is really hard to go in the morning or at the end of the evening, and then the people prefer to have another kind of transportation. For that reason, the companies need to have very, very hard sanitary measures, and they have a lot of protection. For example, they clean every time the car is used, they clean the car, and they have the emergency packet to clean the car. For example, the round of the main pipes, they have gloves and they have a mask in order to can use this kind of measures. And then the reality is that demand now, after the pandemic, is the 70% like before the pandemic, and they think that probably before the end of the year the demand was the same that before the pandemic. And obviously this kind of the transportation is really used for megacities like Madrid and open the possibilities to a lot of lines of research regarding the environment and the health issues. This project is based in a lot of our research project, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. So actually, I don't want to lose more time and would directly switch now to Wendy Purcell from the Harvard University. Just first to the audience, so if you have questions to the speakers, please use the Q&A box. So the presentation of Wendy Purcell is titled Examination of the Auto Sector Equity Through Mobility Solutions. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Christoph. And thank you also to the World Sustainability Forum for the invitation to contribute and participate in this important conference. So I want to introduce you to some of the work that we've been doing around culture of health. So this was a construct developed by John Quelch back in 2016, where he said very famously that every business is in the health business. And it's a program of research that's running between the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, together with the Harvard Business School. And it's supported by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that puts health equity right at the heart of its focus for investing in research. So the culture of health is a model that splits out culture of health across 4 different domains. So that's the consumer health, the employee health, community health, and environmental health. And we adopted the auto industry as a crucible in which to explore culture of health. And so that's some of the work I'm going to present to you today. So very much when we talk about a culture of health, we're talking very much around not so much the absence of disease or infirmity, but very much around a culture across all of those domains, around well-being, around sustainability, around effectively the way we do things around here. So it covers all of those domains. And we were very fortunate and indeed indebted to the auto industry executives, very senior executives that we've been conducting in-depth interviews, adopting a qualitative approach over the last 2.5 years. And without design, in a sense, we effectively now have an experiment. We have a suite of interviews conducted before the pandemic, And we're now revisiting these companies, including those who were unable to participate initially, after, or actually during, as we are within the pandemic now. So it's given us an enormous opportunity to appreciate how these companies were very much promoting and involving themselves in a culture of health across those domains, but it was probably more that they were thinking about ESG and sustainability and their materiality, or they were thinking about injury reduction, or they were looking at health insurance costs and healthcare costs. So it's a very different perspective than I think we're now appreciating as the COVID pandemic has not only shown us health and business, but has also revealed, I think, many of the fissures and inequities in society. So we're now seeing this reframing of a culture of health. So if we just take a look at the kind of environment or the landscape that these auto companies are dealing with, of course, the Global Risks Report highlights, you know, the existential threat of climate change, and so they've been very much focused on renewables and emissions and safety. Pandemic has hit and revealed to us, I think, some very profound social justice, indeed injustices in our world. And so they've been navigating a so-called VUCA environment, so very much volatility and uncertainty and complexity, ambiguity, that's been their normal. And it's also come at the same time, I think, as the important work of the Business Roundtable that talked about shareholder primacy being challenged, and this move to a more inclusive stakeholder agenda, such that we're seeing business play in to what are quite profound societal issues as represented through the sustainability goals of the SDGs, but also more broadly as we take on the sustainable development agenda. So when we're talking about equity, we're talking about interventions which seek to level up and pick people up where they are, so that they're looking at tailored interventions that drive equity. So I just want to highlight a couple of the examples that have come out from what has been a very in-depth study, but so it's not cause and effect. I want to be clear in just summarizing it for this audience. It's not around COVID has caused these things, but it's things that we are hearing and picking up in this new space. So all of the companies were profoundly invested in mobility solutions, and many of them had put equity or issues of equity right at the heart of their focus, whether it was increasing access to mobility, recognizing affordability, whether they were thinking about the environmental space and ensuring that their plants were as clean as possible, or their employees were focused on health. So all of them were in very many different ways. And it isn't a sense of comparing one with another. It's very much that the context in which those companies were operating, either the heritage of the company, their sense of their market segment, or their sense of what they were prioritizing in terms of either founders or shareholders. So they all had a very different approach, but all of them were indeed looking at activities that we could relatively easily map to the culture of health domains. But I think it is fair to say that as we now are revisiting these companies, we are finding the conversations around culture of health being much easier to have. We're not having to make the case for a culture of health. We're very much, they have lived the experience of understanding how health and business are inextricably linked, and how equity shows up across their employee base as they look at comorbidities with COVID, or it shows up in their community as they've leaned in very much with some of these companies have leaned in to be solution providers during the pandemic. And so I just pick out a couple of these examples. So one of the most compelling, I think, has been with discussions with GM, as they've talked about reframing their health and safety agenda around a focus on from injury reduction to promoting well-being and taking a very equitable lens to how those employers are involved in designing and creating, indeed, mobility solutions. I think we see, as we go through the different companies, them highlighting different areas, whether it's around sustainable energy, as we have with Tesla as a disruptor, a technology company affording mobility solutions, or if we're looking at a sense of becoming the most inclusive company, or a company that's championing women or disadvantaged or minority groups in terms of, say, the work that Hyundai does among communities of colour. So we're finding them all promoting mobility as a key transformational agenda that drives equity across those 4 dimensions of the culture of health. So just to summarise, affordability, their emissions, looking beyond, I think, the individual and recognising their societal contract as an auto company is intimately linked into consumer, community, environment, and indeed the employee health agenda. So I don't propose to go through it, but we can map and begin to map and take these different areas and start looking across those domains as a way to understand how they're pursuing equity as a transformational agenda for mobility, and actually start to pull out some of the key enabling attributes that allow them to navigate through these VUCA conditions and adopt a much more adaptive approach to pursuing a culture of health, and through that creating solutions around mobility as an enabler of equity. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. And so again, to the audience, if you have questions, please post them into the Q&A box so that I can take them up after the next presentation. So now we move on to Xiaowen Li from the Delft University of Technology, and the presentation is titled Towards Inclusive Urban Accessibility Framework and Methodology for Urban Transport Inclusiveness Assessment. So please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Christoph. And I'll share my screen now. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Zhao Wen from the Delft University of Technology, and my topic is towards inclusive urban accessibility framework and methodology for urban transport inclusiveness assessment. And we have a case of Xiong'an New Area. My co-author are Professor Martin de Jong and Professor Nikki, Professor Marcel, and Professor Dong Liang. And my presentation includes the following 4 parts. The first one is towards inclusive city, the frameworks and the practices. The second one is transport disadvantage and social exclusion. The third one is measurement of transport disadvantage and inclusiveness. Then we give the case study of Xiong'an New Area. So about inclusive city, there is a well-accepted definition of inclusive city given by UN Habitat in 2001. They said a place where everyone, regardless of their economic means, gender, race, ethnicity, or religion, is enabled and empowered to fully participate in the social, economic, and the political opportunities that cities have to offer. So about inclusive city, the focus from governments or universities or has been changed from reducing urban poverty to exclusion and inequality issues. And models are developed to conduct empirical evidence-based research. And based on this definition, we gave the framework about inclusive development. We define city inclusiveness in 3 aspects with 2 dimensions. Those 3 aspects are social inclusion, economic inclusion, and environmental inclusion. And the 2 dimensions are time and spatial dimension. So to achieve those 3 aspects achievement, and there are 3 drivers, including governance, population growth, and technology. And to realize the inclusive development, some basic resources and services are needed. There are land and housing, transportation, education and training, healthcare, and ecosystem service. Among them, transportation could be a very important component because transport disadvantage can cause social exclusion issues. As you can see in the figure, different people with different characteristics, they have different needs for social activities. But with the urbanization process, cities are becoming bigger and bigger. So if people want to have some social activities, they will need transport tools to achieve that. Then there's some problem about affordability, safety, noise, pollution, and accessibility issues would happen. So this would cause some social exclusion problems. To control and to improve transport inclusiveness, the measurement of transport disadvantage or inclusiveness are very important. There are already 230 indicators from Sustainable Development Goals developed by United Nations Economic and Social Council. But those indicators are mostly transport supply oriented, which means in some aspect, they may ignore the people's real needs. So then the 4 basic types of accessibility measures, including infrastructure-based, location-based, person-based, and utility-based. With the current research, broader indicators, including traffic-related pollution, safety, and health, are developed. So we use those indicators to evaluate whether transport facility is inclusive as the left photo or exclusive as the right photo. Here we give a case study of Xiong'an new area. Here I will give a brief introduction of this new area. This is the area located 105 kilometers southwest of Beijing and 105 kilometers west of Tianjin. It consists of 3 counties and 60 villages. The population in 2017 is 1.4 million. But the urbanization rate was relatively low. It's just 42%. And the regional economy is weaker than the average level of Hebei province. But actually China is trying to develop this area with the most advanced technology and financial as well as policy support to make this place as a model of the city of future. So the main function of this area is serving as a development hub for the Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei economic triangle. And the long capital functions of Beijing are expected to be relocated here, including some state-owned enterprises, government agencies, and research and development institutions. This is the basic information about this area. So focused on transport aspects, Xiong'an will have some significant update. For example, they will build 4 verticals and 2 horizontals high-speed railway network, and various subway lines, bus rapid transit, and express roads between the core area and the surrounding villages. And the public transport plus bicycle plus walking travel pattern and will reach 90% of the model speed. And the instantaneous response and intelligent decision-making transport system will be applied in Xiong'an. So you can see in the right photo, Xiong'an high-speed railway. Here is the whole area of Xiong'an with the blue color, and 4 train stations there. They're all high-speed railway train stations, and among them, there's one named Xiong'an High-Speed Railway Station. This one with a total construction area of about 470,000 square meters. This will become the largest high-speed railway station in Asia. And together with the other 3 stations, Xiong'an, this city will become the densest region for high-speed railway stations in the whole world. And so based on the model we developed previously, here you can see the driving force for Xiong'an is industrial development, technology, and population growth. Those driving force push Xiong'an, give a lot of pressure to the transport system. Gradually, the transport system pressure could show some state changes. For example, the accessibility of public transport has changed, and the density of road network has been increased. Gradually, those states could have impacts on those 3 aspects, including social, economic, and environment. To control this situation, to make it more inclusive, governance measures would be taken. So in the next page, we would give our suggestions and analysis the potential social exclusion issues. The first thing is the layout of transport infrastructure tends to shape the spatial distribution of urban economic clusters, eventually resulting in fragmented urban development, and the high-level public service come at high charges. So the diverse need and consumption capacities of different income groups need to be evaluated. For the design of service facilities, the ability of people in different age groups and educational backgrounds, they need to accept new technologies to be taken into consideration. And the advanced transportation facilities are mainly designed to meet the needs of high-income groups commuting frequently between Xiong'an and surrounding big cities, for example, Beijing or Tianjin. But the negative effects of noise and air pollution are shared by all residents in Xiong'an. So here we give the conclusion and some implications. In the planning of transport system, attention should be paid not only to advanced facilities, but also to the affordability and convenience of all users, which means we should use broader indicators to evaluate it. And in order to reach a consensus on the concept of inclusive development, governments should widely consult with local communities involved in particular projects before making decisions. And thank you for your listening. And our project is funded by, this is a Sino-Dutch project, so it's funded by Netherlands Organization for Scientific Research, which is NWO, and also receive funding from National Natural Science Foundation of China, is NSFC. So if you would like to know more about our project or my research, you could check the ResearchGate or LinkedIn link here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also very interesting presentation. Now we can start with the Q&A session. Until now, the Q&A box is still empty, so please, to the audience, if you have questions, post them into the Q&A box. Okay, otherwise, I have prepared some questions for the speakers. So maybe first to Maria. I was thinking about, so I can imagine that it is still hard for the sharing mobility providers, that they still suffer from lower utilization rates. So I don't know, maybe what is your opinion? Do they make it after the pandemic, or?
Well, just this morning I have been in a meeting with some of these companies, and surprisingly, they think that they don't think that the demand will recover so quick, because they think, because really during March to June, all the shared mobility was disappeared of the streets of Madrid. Then nobody used this kind of transportation. But they think the people now have a lot of fares. The people have fare to go to the bus, the people offer to go to the underground. Then they prefer to use one car. If possible, the old car, but the reality is that in the big city, a lot of people can not for the money, because there is a lot of small place to park. Then the people prefer to go in a long transportation, like for example, shared mobility. For that reason, they think that the business is recovering more quickly than other kind of businesses. And then they're happy for the situation. And the most of the, for example, the cars in Madrid, the car sharing in Madrid is electric cars. Then it's very, very good for the people, because it's very cheap. In fact, in Madrid, for example, car sharing transportation is cheaper than take the underground of the bus. And in Madrid, the bus and the underground is really cheap, more cheap than other countries and other cities in Europe. Then car sharing is a really good service, but very good price.
Okay, thank you very much. Good to hear. So in the Q&A box, there is a question for Xiaowen. Here an attendee is asking what kind of emission estimation model can be used to quantify the vehicle emissions in Changwon City?
Hi. I think this question maybe is better to check the indicators already built, more specifically focused on emission aspects on some relatively research, because in this current, my research in this paper is not that specific. So.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe a last question to Wendy Purcell. So I think on your final slide, you talked about possible mobility solutions by the auto industry, which go beyond individual vehicles. So what would be possible scenarios from your side, or what can you think of?
Sorry, I missed the middle of the question. Possible mobility solutions that
go beyond individual vehicles.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, as you know, obviously they're looking at shared mobility solutions as well as autonomous vehicles, a whole range of different kind of networked and coordinated, so that they become very much part of an infrastructure offer as opposed to an individual mobility response. So it's everything from shared and multiple to individuals that are run more on a grid system. So I think there's a whole range of opportunities to think beyond the individual driving their gas-guzzling car.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just want briefly to conclude in one sentence for this session. So we have seen that there are many interesting thoughts and models of changing the urban mobility possibilities, as well as to provide inclusive access to them. So thank you for the presentation, and thank you also very much for the participants for their attention. And now I think it's time for some closing remarks by Professor Ed Constable.
Wow, how fantastic to finish on the high scientific quality of this last session. I really enjoyed it. To further emphasize the unique nature of this event, the parallel sessions at the end of this afternoon have meant that we have 2 staggered closing remarks, and Max Bergman will close the session on food insecurity in 1 hour's time. Yeah, what can I say? As always, William Shakespeare provides inspiration for the inarticulate speaker, and in his play Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare wrote, "Parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say good night till it be morrow." So from my side, good night, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning. It is my sad duty to bring this 8th World Sustainability Forum to an end. I think this has been a tremendous event. I've learned a great deal from the various sessions. The richness and the diversity of the excellent presentations has left me with an overwhelming sense of optimism for the future, and also pride in the dedication, energy, innovation, and tenacity of both young and established workers in delivering the targets of the SDGs. As with all conferences, I think that we have made new friends and acquaintances, initiated dialogues with future research partners in exactly the same way as at a physical event. Unfortunately, the only thing missing was the catalysis of good food and good drink and the opportunity for real physical contact. Now, I had 2 texts prepared for this next paragraph, and I'm proud to say that I can tear up the one that begins, "I apologize for the technical failures. We obviously underestimated the difficulties in organizing a major online conference. We didn't." In contrast, I can only say that I am pleasantly astonished how the entire event proceeded without any major technical or communications problems. I believe that the success here should make us really think hard about the future nature of scientific exchanges as we move towards whatever the new normal will turn out to be. Of course, this success is due in part to the quality and the discipline of all attendees. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the speakers, the awardees, the chairman, and the attendees for their outstanding contributions, and look forward to seeing you in 2021. However, there is a second component that has ensured the success of this forum. Firstly, I would like to thank Dr. Shukun Lin, founder and president of MDPI and founder and chairman of the MDPI Sustainability Forum, for initiating and enabling this series of forums. Thank you, Shukun. Secondly, I would like to thank the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Scientific Officer of MDPI, Delia Mihaila and Frank Vasquez, for their continuous support, encouragement, assistance, engagement, cheering us up when we were crying. Thank you. However, the most important thank yous are due to the people who you have not seen or have only seen as names on the screen. This is the backroom team that has ensured that the event has run smoothly. Smoothly from the organization of the program, smoothly from communication with attendees before the forum, smoothly through keeping all attendees informed about the modalities and the access points to the forum, smoothness in ensuring that late registrations were dealt with rapidly, efficiently, and with a minimum of bureaucracy, to keeping the electronic virtual platform functional throughout the last 3 days. Without the enormous dedication of the conference e-managers, Charlotte Gardini and Pablo Velázquez, and the teams in Basel and Barcelona, Sarah Vilovich, Cedric Spindler, Karen Gessler, Ana Sanchez, Elena Gonzalez, Facundo Santome, and Geraldine Leuenberger, and of course the program manager, Zinette Bergman, this meeting quite simply would not have happened. Thank you. And can I ask those of you who are online to turn on your video so that the attendees can see you? Pablo, please. So, thank you. You made this event work. As a very small thank you, some of the better known products of the Swiss and the Spanish confectionery industries are on their way to you. With these words, I declare this session of the forum formally closed. I give my personal thanks to all involved with the forum for making it such a success. Give my wishes that you all keep safe and healthy in these unusual circumstances, and I look forward to seeing you all next year. And thank you for listening to me, and thank you for being such a wonderful set of participants in this meeting. Max, do you want to add anything?
I do. I also want to thank MDPI more globally for an incredibly interesting vision that when introduced maybe a decade or more ago, academics would have said it would never work. I would like to thank certainly Frank also for his long-term support over the years. And the last person, I'm not leaving out MDPI because if I start naming things, then I would just repeat what Ed said. But Ed, when was that? Approximately 5 or 6 years ago, you were an incredible inspiration to the University of Basel to invest into sustainability. And it was probably longer in your field, but this is when we started outside of your field to recognize the contributions that you are trying to make. So Ed, thank you very much for the tremendous work that you invest in sustainability on so many different levels. I have to say that you were a tremendous inspiration to me to get into that, and saying that now it must be older than that. So that was probably 2013, 2012 or something like that. It was a wonderful event. I have to run off because I'm actually moonlighting right now. There's another session that I'm supposed to be in. To the audience, I'm looking forward to seeing you again, to the presenters, of course, and we are with MDPI forever tied, bloods, brothers and sisters. So until soon, goodbye.
Thank you, good night, and keep safe.